Everyone, so I just wanted to go through and just kind of share what my approach was to making this little piece here. It was heavily inspired by Motion Punk's version of this. I had a lot of different iterations I went through to try and finally land on something that looked, or at least resembled what he made. So let me go ahead and get into this little breakdown. All right, so these were all the explorations. Let me just go into the main setup here. All right, so basically just start with a box. Nothing too crazy. Match size it so that we just stick it to the floor. Blast it away the top and bottom, and I reversed the normals so that way everything was went inside. I remeshed this because my thought behind this was that what I wanted to do was delete the geometry, but I wanted enough geometry so that it had some kind of substance, some kind of look to it, right? So if we preview the fall off from mops, what you'll see here is that it slowly undulates, right? So I just kind of went with my own version of this, and then so that gives me like a nice just a nice look on the noise pattern, so that way I can break up the way that the particles spawn. I did a blur, which just faintly blurs the mops fall off here. And then I promoted this from point to primitive because what I was going to be doing is deleting the primitive, right? So I did an expression here. So if the mops fall off is greater than the area here, so you can, so if I take this, you can see that it expands and contracts, depending on the slider, right? So this gives me a group, and then what I did was blasted that group away. And so this now gives me this sort of crawling noise that's deleting the geometry procedurally. Next, I did a polyframe just to give me normals, so you can see that all my normals are pointing in. And then what I have here is my velocity. So what I needed to do was create a target velocity vector. So if we control click here and click on V, what you'll see is this is pointing in a particular direction, which is specific to this point, right? So, which if you can see it, this point is just kind of in the middle here. And so this gives me just a target through into the middle. And if we take this and we move it, you could see that this basically moves the target velocities towards that direction. It's pretty simple. You first get the vector target position, right? So you set a variable using the point function here. We call to input 1, which is this one here. We grab the p position, and then I just use 0. You can use pt_num, but this just defines the single point. Then what I need to do is normalize the position minus the target. And so that gives me basically just a vector direction from the target to from the points to the target, and then I needed to invert them. So I just multiplied it by -1, which inverts them and creates it. Which gives me this. Next thing I wanted to do was amplify the velocity vector and just create my own channel float here. So just multiplying the vector property here, and so that way you can see that I'm getting a multiplied velocity vector that I can control. All right, next was my point VOP, and so in this point VOP, basically what I wanted to do was I wanted to add some curl noise to it, so that way it had just a bit of variation in life to the velocities. It's ever so subtle, but what this allowed me to do was, you can see I can multiply it, and so it sort of just changed the direction just a little bit, and then also I can increase the velocity amplitude and the roughness of the curl noise by middle clicking and promoting these parameters. So basically I'm just taking the point position and putting it into the curl noise, and then I'm multiplying that output by this velocity amp parameter, which you see here, which is this. So this just increases the intensity. And then I am adding it to the original vectors. So that way it's just adding the curl noise to the previous velocity and inputting it out into the V attribute. Now the next part, I just threw this into my popnet. Let's go ahead and turn off the visualizer here. So inside of my popnet, I went through quite a few different iterations, but here's kind of what I ended up with. So first we have this my collider, which is the logo, right? So let me hop out. So this is just my basic logo. Just import it, fuse things, normal, transformed it into the middle, added a little bit of poly bevel to it, right? Nothing too crazy there. And then for my background field, so I created a height field here. Let's see, there we go. So with my height field, let's see. So here we go. Here's the height field, just the basic height field. Changed it to something a little bit small. Added some noise onto it. So this gives me just variation in, in the height field. And it's just, yep, that's all it is. This mask by object. So I brought in my object, which is my logo here, turned it into a VDB, just a distance VDB. And then use that SDF VDB as a mask inside of the field. So then what I did was I took that, flattened it, resampled it to smooth it out, and then I converted the height field into a polygon mesh. So that's that. This is out front, mask by feature. I actually don't think I did anything with these here. That was... Yeah, so I only use this outfield and then this out volume height, which I'll show you in just a second. So back into my sims here. So so I grabbed that out LP collider, that's that middle one here. And then I took this out vol height, which is that height field, and used them as static objects that the particles would be basically colliding with and bouncing back up. The next thing that I did was I brought in my pop source. I used the first context geometry, which is this input, right? So this is the geometry that is changing, deleting, moving. You can do this in different ways. You can actually scatter points, and then you can group them using noises. There's a variety of ways to do this, but this is the way that I did, and that worked for me. Then I did a group by bounds and created this force bounds. So that was inside of it. I'll show you what that does. So the group force, what I wanted to do was just added some additional noise that's around, that's based on this group. So once they come into this group, I added some force and added basically just some swirling inside of it. So it just had a little bit more variation here. This pop advect by volumes, out vel LP1. So this was, let me find it here, because we definitely went through a lot of different iterations. So this here, okay. So this, what I did was I brought in my logo, I cleaned it, removed everything, added normals, match sized it to the middle, transformed, curve along edge. So I just got the edges, resampled it, added the poly frame, and this gives me my normals, my attribute VOP. So this, what I did was basically took a vector to vector one, brought it into the curl noise, and then I took the average and then did a cross and then added that into my normal position. So this is giving me what you can see is the cross product basically gives me these normal tangents that move along the geometry, because I wanted the swirls to kind of move along to just move along the logo lines, right? So now what I did was I took that normal and then used it as my my input vector for velocity for v. And then this basically I just added a multiplier and just wanted it to work on the x and z and not on the y, and this just amplifies it. So this creates my curves. The next thing I did was I created a VDB, right? So created an empty VDB, named it vel, make sure it was a fog volume and the type to vector float. This is important because we are dealing with vectors. And then I used the bounds of my of the curves here to create just a bounding box. So that way I have something to activate. Right, so now I activated this based on the reference, and so this gives me this velocity fog volume here. And so now this activate just expanded it, so just brought out the volumes out. Now inside of my volume VOP, what I did was I did a PC open, right? So you grab it in the point cloud. So what I'm doing is I'm feeding in these curve point clouds, these curves here, the points on this curve. Let me change this. Let me disable this. So we have all these points, and I'm bringing it into the volume VOP. And so this allows me to bring those points in based on the second input here, bring it into the PC open. I'm looking for the point position. And so what it's going to do is it's going to grab that position vector, and then it's going to give me a search radius. Now I can filter that into, so it's taking that point position and then grabbing just the V, the V attribute here, and it's filtering just to that V attribute. And then I'm doing a cross product again with the original position to this new point cloud, and then bound it out to my velocity volume, right? So we're bringing it out here. Now, if you want to see what this does, basically we set up another, I just did an influence field, did the reference, activated it, expanded it, scattered a bunch of points. So this gives me just a bunch of points here, and then that brings it into my volume trail, which shows me exactly what my new volume velocities are going to be doing inside of this. That's what this VDB does. So without the cross product that I did there, you kind of see, you see what the difference here. And so now this creates this sort of swirling velocity vector that's just around my logo, right? So I brought this this out vel1 into my pop network. So, and then that's what I'm doing here is this out velocity LP1. So I'm increasing the scale, changing, I'm using the update force, and so that's what this pop advect is. Now this group by bounds, again, setting this as velocity bounds because I wanted the second group here to influence my my pop drag. So this just kind of increases the resistance here, so it kind of slows them down from their original speed, right? So, and then in my pop solver, I just disabled the hit attributes, nothing else. I just didn't need any of this collision feedback. And so that gives me, this, right? So you can see they come in kind of fast. When they get in closer, they slow down. And then once they start colliding with the object, they're internally here. What you'll start seeing is that they get kind of this curl motion inside. While they're rebounding, they're also curling and slowing down, and so this gave me just a lot of variation and variety inside of the sim around the logo, which gave me the look that I was really looking for. You can see that it's colliding over the surface, so you can kind of see here. You can see the kind of squiggles. So they were bouncing off of the surface, which also gives me more variation in the way that these flowed over flowed over the geometry and into that. So the next thing is I just cleaned it. I just removed everything but the age, ID, life, P, and velocity. I did a attribute blur. So just to kind of take the position and blur it and just kind of move them kind of closer together, right? So it gives it more of a stringy sort of liquid fluid type effect. So if you turn it off, you can see they just bring them a little bit closer together. This set orient, basically this sets the orientation of each of the points position to the vector direction of the velocity attribute to the z values. So this orient here, what you'll see if we control click, you can see the orient, and so this you can kind of see they're all pointing in that z direction. Without it, I don't have the orientation. And the way that I was going to be using this is actually through a MOPS instancer. So this MOPS instancer, I have space G in that I had these little rocks, these little pebbles, and I had just a variation of them. I'm pretty sure these were from Quixel. So then I brought them into the MOPS instancer, and so the MOPS instancer will basically instance all of this geometry onto those points. So I set the, once this thing finishes cooking here, you'll see what happens. I did use this, but I found that my render times were getting a little bit too, let's go back to the beginning here. Okay. And so this MOPS instancer, if we go into distribution, you go into this template group. And so this template group was right here. So they are being instanced onto that geometry, which for some reason you can't see here. Let's see if I go a little bit farther out. So you can see that it just takes a lot of time for this to cook. And since my particles were so small, I didn't feel like I needed to use this. So I actually ended up not using this at all. So I'm going to cancel this, but this is definitely a way that you can take kind of like a variety of reference geometry and bring it and instance it onto your points, onto the template points. And okay, so that is that. And then what I did here after the orient, I set a randomized p scale, so that way I just had more variation, right? Like everything with what we do is about creating variation and detail. Like that's where you get a lot of the detail. So this attribute promote was brought this into a detail attribute, as well as this for min max, and that was actually used inside of my shader, which I'll show you in a little bit. And so this is using the normalized age. I just a basic wrangle. So we're setting the color attribute to a channel ramp color based on the normalized age, and the normalized age attribute comes from your age and your life have to be present for the normalized age to show up. You don't actually see it here. It's just sort of an intrinsic attribute that Houdini does for you, which is a great way to get, the life from 0 to 1. And then we go out. So then the next thing that I'll show you is just the materials here. Let's see, which one did I use? So I ended up not using, so that promotion of the min max, yeah, I ended up not using it. It was, yeah, I ended up not using it. Basically, you can bring in the age min and max as a detail attribute and bring it into Redshift, but that I couldn't get it to work properly, so I just did it this way, set the color attribute here. And basically just brought in my CD attribute with a Redshift attribute lookup, brought it into a ramp, and then did a color layer. So because this is black to white, I used the base layer and then multiplied it. So that gives me the variation in the color. And let me just double check here, because I think what I did, so this sim render, so I did the first one. So if we go back to our material context, go into pops here. So I did a ramp. Yeah, so here we go. It's the same. So I took this is the one I actually used. Same thing, brought in the color attribute, plugged it into my ramp here, found a few colors that I really liked. So 0 to 1, 0 to 1. And this was going to be the gradient that they followed. Nothing too crazy here. A little bit of reflection, some roughness, and that's about it. Brought this in. So it kept it pretty simple. So that's my sims. The height field I did not use. So this is basically just casting. I just wanted something that casted a shadow. And so this is, I mean, it's just object fuse, normal, transform, polybevel, nothing too crazy here. This is just casting a shadow based on this light here. So it just added some more variation into the render. In the redshift object properties, I went to this. So I went into the visibility, turn off the primary ray visibility so the camera doesn't see it, and it just casts a shadow. The background here is just a grid, UV project, and then I used OD tools for just a quick little material here. And that material is this guy here. OD tools creates kind of a seriously robust build of these just these color layers and diffuse textures and everything else. It's crazy once you get in here. I basically just took the same color values and brought them in into the diffuse color here for the background. And so now if we go back to my object context, that is pretty much it. So set up camera. I had one for a 1x1, one for a 16x9. And then these are just lights. I have a null that I sent here, so I stuck it to the middle here. And then I have one light over here, overhead. This is using a texture, which is this lines gobo. So this was a gobo, just kind of projecting these lines over the geometry, over the sim. Pretty high intensity. And then this is a high intensity, sort of a little bit less than half spread, small little light, so it casts a little bit of a harder shadow. A dome to just kind of fill in, which I turned off. And then this third light, let me just see, it's also off. So these things are null. And that is pretty much it. And so if we just take a look at this real quick, let me just go right click and render view. If you want to separate panels like that, it's alt left and right bracket. And so that's how I open this little preview window here. We can just select our 1x1 cam and hit play. All right, licensing out of the way. We are back. I'm preparing materials, shaders. There we go. We are loading in. And there you go. That is the final look of this sim. Just to note here on my Sims geometry, I did transform a little bit, and then in my redshift object, I went to the particles, or my redshift object properties. I went to the settings, and what I did was I enabled mesh deformations blur from the velocity attribute. So this gives me, it's using the velocity attribute to create the motion blur. And then in my particles, I just rendered the objects as particles and left the global scale multiplier as it is, since I set the P scale inside of the sim itself. And that is it. Nothing crazy with the redshift render settings. I could definitely probably bring this down. We have just sampling, I did turn off the automatic when 0.08 threshold, 16, 128, overrid the samples to 1024, and then motion blur. Use the instance particle blur. I kept it to the shutter. If you want the drag to be a little bit longer, you can just reduce this to like 30, and then if we refresh, you will notice that you start getting longer sort of trails with the particles based on the shutter speed here. And let's see, globals, yeah, those are increased. GI, there really isn't a lot of GI here. I could probably reduce this, but I just want to make sure that my GI had enough samplings. Caustics turned off. Optimizations, I just increased the cutoff thresholds just a little bit, so that way I can decrease, excuse me, the render times for each of one of the frames. This is something a lot of people miss. This complete restriction before rendering. Essentially, you want this. Sometimes you can get rendering errors, and so this just basically reconstructs the rays each and every single frame. It's just something that I've been doing for a long time. This here, I just increased the bucket size to 256, and then I think that was it. And then I obviously sent this out the deadline, but you can see it here, just kind of slowly cooking away. Render times weren't too bad on this, based on my settings. Probably could optimize this more, reduce the settings, but I wasn't too worried about it since I sent this to render overnight. And so we're looking at 22 seconds a frame here. That's not too bad. And the last thing, I just wanted to double check something to show you here. So this shadow, this render, so I actually, okay, so I'm using glass, right? So this material here, this glass, basically what I did, set a base color, reflection color, and then a transmission and scatter color. So that is what you are seeing here, is that you are the lights, the glass is transmitting through and scattering this sort of, this, whatever this color here, I can't think of it right now, and it's sending it through the object. And then it's through the direction of the shadow, and yeah, it's just scattering this color. I just thought it looked cool. It definitely increased my render times, but I mean, whatever, it's just for fun, right? So there you go. That is how I made this little piece. I hope you potentially learned something, and if you have any questions, please reach out. I'd be more than happy to try and answer them. Yeah, take care.